There are times in our lives where you and I have been in pursuit of dreams or visions that we have for our lives, and we're getting really excited and gung-ho and making our way toward it, and then we find that there's a big, huge obstacle in the way. And then we take a step back and we say, now what? Well, if you can relate to that, then this series is going to be a good one for you. I'm Pastor John Rudolph from the North Carroll Cooperative Parish, and it is June of 2020, and we're going to be using the book of Joshua in the Old Testament to answer the question, now what, to these obstacle situations. Joshua is a book that picks up in the Old Testament story of the people of God preparing to move into the Promised Land. It's a new chapter for the Israelites, but it's part of an old story going back generation and generation and generation, all the way back to Abraham, who was set apart and promised to be the father of many and someone that was going to have the land that God promised to them. And all along the way, from Isaac to Joseph, and then finally to Moses, and now Joshua, in our case, of what we're reading today, all along the way, there were challenges and conflicts and contests and disruptions and disputes that made the promise seem less and less likely to happening. And so it's a perfect book to use for our own purposes here as we try to grow together in our faith. We find ourselves in chapter 1 of the book, great place to start. And Joshua is being commissioned by God to take over for Moses, who had passed away. And so Joshua has gathered all the tribes of Israel, the whole family together, and their leaders, and he's receiving instructions from the Lord, a commissioning and an encouragement to be prepared to go and claim what was promised to his father and grandfathers and all the family that came before him. During this time, everybody's kind of getting antsy. They're all gathered. They're all excited. Remember, they've been wandering around the desert for 40 years. They can finally taste it and see it and smell it. And as they're ready to go and they're ready for the charge, they look up and there's the obstacle. It's the river, the Jordan River. And so, it's not going to be the biggest obstacle that they face, and we're going to discover that in the coming weeks. But it is the first obstacle, because before they can even think about going into the land, they got to get across this river. So it's a great place to stop and talk about what's next. Now what? And so as we do that, one of the things that I've learned the hard way along life's road is that chasing dreams and walking into promises and visions is not for the faint of heart. In fact, if your dream is not contested, disputed, or conflicted, there's a good chance it's not a God-sized dream. And so you might want to take a step back and say, God, I heard a pastor say this one time, if that's not happening to your dream or vision, you might want to ask God for another dream or vision. Because the devil's going to attack you when you're on track. So that's one of the reasons we have obstacles. There are others, but that's one of the reasons. So if you don't have any obstacles, you got to get a new vision and a new dream. And so this is not unexpected for Joshua and Joshua's family, but they are anxious to get started. And so Joshua's got everybody gathered there. In fact, they're going to be gathered there at the banks of the river for another 3 days as they plan and they prepare and they hear words of encouragement and instructions from the Lord. And again, what we'll discover in the next few weeks together is that it's not going to be the last time that there's an obstacle in front of them and possessing and taking the land. Bruce Birch, who's a theologian and a friend and colleague of ours, he says it's very important to remember as we begin the reading of this book of Joshua that this is not unexpected. And this is very much a theological truth. And that is that the primary journey that faith must always make, and Joshua and his family is no different, as it moves from the simple, one-dimensional, childlike claims and visions to the real world, where every such claim and promise is endlessly contested. So this is just one dispute or one obstacle in a long series of obstacles that are going to come over and over and over again. And Joshua knows this, and he's going to lead them anyway. He's not going to pack up and go back to the wilderness. He's going to go forward. And this is why he's going to go forward. Because in the speech that God gives him of encouragement and commissioning, he gives him three things that are useful for leadership, that he's able to pass on to the leaders of the tribes of Israel and pass on today to us. Number one is, when you're facing an obstacle and you're asking yourself, now what? Number one, remember that God is going to be with you. In verse 5 of chapter 1, it says, no one will be able to stand up against you during your lifetime, because I will be with you in the same way I was with Moses. I will not desert or leave you. So we're facing an obstacle to a dream or a vision. Just knowing the fact, number one, that God is going to be with you and not abandon you, gives us the courage and the strength and the energy to go forward. Which leads to number two. God further says in verse 6 to Joshua, be courageous and strong, because you are the one who will help this people take possession of the land, which I pledged to give to your ancestors. And so that's an important piece here, is not only that God is with you, but that you need to be brave and strong. And so it's a little bit of encouragement. God's put this dream or vision for you, put you on this path because God knows you can be strong and courageous, especially since God's going to be with you. And then finally, we can get a third piece of instruction here. God tells Joshua in verse 7, be very brave and strong as you carefully obey all the instruction that Moses, my servant, commanded you. And so as we go back a few pages into the book of Deuteronomy, I mean, it's almost full of, every page is full of instructions that God had given Moses and then Moses had given the people. And he's simply saying, keep those words, keep the Bible, keep the scriptures, meditate on this word day in and day out. And then you will know how to overcome, and you'll have the courage to overcome, and I will be with you. Those three things can help us answer the question, now what? It helped Joshua, and Joshua is going to go now to the leaders of the tribes of Israel, and he's going to give them that same encouragement. God's going to be with you. Be courageous and strong, and meditate on the word. And as you do that, we'll be able to take control and possession of this land. And so it works for Joshua and his people. And when we gather again next week, we'll see, the next steps of this and what the next obstacles are going to be. But for you and I this week, let's meditate on those three words together. And let's think about the dreams and passions and visions that God has placed on our hearts. Maybe there have been some in the past that you put on the shelf because the obstacles seem too big. Maybe there's one that's on your heart now and you haven't even told anybody about it because there's too many obstacles in the way even to get started or even to utter the words like, this is the dream that God's placed on my heart. Whatever it is, let's think about it and let's pray about it. I know in our household this week, with all the things going on, both around the world and all the pain and discomfort and the things that are happening in cities across our country and close to home, and we're still in the middle of this coronavirus, and we have parish news of extension, and then in our own household, we have personal things like Annika, our oldest, whose dream had come true this time last year, where she got to live in New York City and to go to school and start to chase after the dream that God had put on her heart when she was in the second grade. In the second grade, she heard and developed this vision and dream that she was going to be a star on Broadway. And her dream was starting to come true last year. And now, last Thursday, at least temporarily, that dream was put on hold. It was actually put on hold back in March when she had to move back home because of the virus. And she did online virtual school, which is not the same. As much as it's fun to live with Pastor Melissa and I, it's not New York City. And she was doing fine with that. But she found out last Thursday that she can't go back to New York City. They're not going to open the campus up for the next term. It's going to be all virtual. But they did give her another option. And so she was crushed for the moment. The other option was you could take a leave of absence, or you could move to Hollywood and go to their LA campus. And so we encouraged her to take a step back and to be prayerful, meditate on the Word, search the Scriptures. Number 2, to know that God is with her and that God had put this dream on her heart. And then lastly, be courageous and brave. Now, I just gave those to you out of order on purpose because it's not about the order. It's about those 3 things collectively. Meditation on the Word, being brave, and remembering that God is with you. No matter what order you do it in, those are truths. And it's truths that Annika used to make her decision. Now, I'm not exactly sure I'm excited about the decision she made, but she decided, like, my dream is still going to come true, and no obstacle is going to be too big for me to keep on the path. And so she's moving to Hollywood in July. And so that's her dream. And so what is your dream? What is your vision? More importantly, what is the dream or vision that God's put on your heart? And I'll be thinking of the same this week as well. And if you don't have one, be prayerful that God's going to place something on your heart for you to be passionate about. And then we can be prepared and ready for the obstacles that come. And we can be ready and we can claim that God is with us. And we can be ready to be courageous and strong together. And we'll be ready to remember that we need to meditate and read the Scriptures daily. And then we can overcome one obstacle at a time. And so may this word be with you as it is with us until we meet again. Amen.